Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that video. Oh, I'm on the other side now. Look at that. How did I get over there? How about I move back over here? Okay, there we go. So I hope you enjoyed that video. It's interesting to think about how our CLD learners are actually treated in the classroom. So let's continue on with some terminology that you might have heard around CLD learners is ESL, English as a Second Language. Basically, we took that out of circulation because oftentimes the student was not learning English as a second language. They were learning English as a third or fourth or potentially fifth language. You might hear now ELL learner, English language learner, which is a little bit more, the light's back on. I'm just going to shut it off. Which is then a little bit more probably relevant to what the student's situation actually is. Some terms around here is you will hear BICS. And BICS is the basic interpersonal communication skills. Basically what BICS is saying is that this is like lunchroom playground kind of talk. So students have they can basically communicate with the teacher, with their peers in this case in English as they're learning English as their first language. CALP is cognitive academic language proficiency. So this is the academic side that they need an understanding of language at the level where they can actually understand textbooks, articles, things like that. This takes 5 to 7 years to develop this. So you think about that child that comes to you in grade 6 or 7, and they have very little English language in their background. It's going to take them until grade 11 or 12 to get to an academic level. And think about the content of grade 11 and 12. So it's tricky. It's really tricky for these young people that are coming to us as ELL or CLD learners. Okay, facets of literacy in contemporary times. So we're still talking literacy as a sort of this umbrella term about what is literacy in our 21st century. So basically, multiliteracy is, we have to look at literacy from a multitude of angles. It's beyond linear text-based reading and writing of Western schooling, so we can't just focus on Western civilization, and it's more than just literacy in English. It's situational, which means that we have to take into account the learner, the class, and the teacher in this when we're teaching literacy. It's ideological, which means it's not just a set of skills to be learned, but how skills are used and how they're able to relate to power structures. So there's an ideology that's always linked with literacy, and it encompasses a broad range of modes. And a mode is a set of resources people in a given culture can use to communicate. For example, print, image, music, and speech. Information is culturally based. All information is culturally based, not understood universally. Okay, so we sometimes especially talk about music being the universal language. I would push back against that, saying that when I was in Beijing and I went to a Beijing opera, I did not understand it because it is actually on a totally different, our musical notation is on semitones, and for the Beijing opera, it's on quarter tones. So I did not understand it, but somebody who had grown up in that culture would definitely understand it. So very few things are universally understood. It's so much of our information is culturally based. Okay? And some modes are favored by cultural elite, reading and writing, whereas rap music isn't. Some people would say, no, rap music can't be academic. Others would say, absolutely, it's academic. So that's the mode It's a set of resources people in a given culture can use to communicate. Okay, the second part of literacy in our contemporary times is the idea that literacy and identity is linked with social practice. So basically, social practice is how we navigate through society. So we know what a stop sign means. We know how to speak appropriately to the president of the college. We know what happens when we send a text message all in caps. So again, it's these really cultural based, and it depends on our understanding of literacy as a social practice. Okay, so we engage in social situations in our everyday lives, and in those social situations, literacy is absolutely important. So think about how much you have used literacy today already. Have you sent a text? Have you read an email? Have you looked at Twitter, Facebook? So we use literacy and we use that to connect socially. Think about in our everyday lives. We go to buy a new set of tires. We go to the grocery store. We visit the doctor. We are engaging in literacy through our speaking and our comprehension and understanding. It is an accepted way of engaging in social practices. We know how to greet people. We know how to talk on the phone. We know how to send a cute emoji, those things. And we take those things for granted when we are in the society. And it builds identities, communities, and cultures. So if you think about why the French Canadians in Quebec are they just so want to keep that French language alive, is because there are so many other things that are connected to the language, all their social interaction to the language. So that's why it's important that they keep that particular language. And for those who have been immersed in the culture, literacy as social practice is almost unnoticed. If you have traveled anywhere and you've, maybe you've gone into a store and you've done something like as a faux pas, like you're not supposed to touch the fruit or you're not supposed to do this or that, that's one of those social things that you don't know because you're not from that culture, but it's just an assumption when you are in the particular culture. So that's literacy as social practice. We also, and this might sound really kind of over dramatic, but it is so true. Literacy and identity as social practice absolutely can define who you are. So think about how we view ourselves as individuals is wrapped up in our literacy skills. So think about going to the grocery store or the doctor without having any literacy skills, not being able to read, not being able to write, not being able to communicate. Think about how our children view themselves is also wrapped up in their literacy skills. So if a child can't read and they're in grade 8, how into school are they? Not very, okay? How children develop who they are is wrapped up in literacy skills. If they become a bad student because they can't read, that becomes part of who they actually are and how they identify themselves. And developing literacy skills should be enjoyable, meaningful, and engaging. So it's a tall order when we're talking about literacy skills. Okay, continue on here. This is the final facet, and this is, I think, one of the most interesting ones of all, is critical literacy. And this is one of your readings, Freebody and Luke. So have a read through this. We're going to have a little bit of a go with what is Text Decoder Participant User Analyst on Thursday. So I'm going to leave that reading with you to read through. We're going to look at this. This is just a little bit of a visual for those of you who like a visual representation a little bit. I'm just going to say one thing about this as you do your reading. Think about that this is not a linear model. We want to be doing all of this all the time. So grade 1s, absolutely we have to teach them encoding and decoding skills. We have to figure out, they have to be able to make meaning. They have to use text. But grade ones have to also be able to critically analyze texts. So this is grade one, this is grade two, this is grade three, grade four. This is happening all the time. Grade one, grade four, grade 9, grade 12. So be thinking about that as you read through your particular reading for this week. Okay, let's continue on with this, another aspect of critical literacy. And I want to reiterate that critical literacy is not critical. It's not negative, but it means that you are critically analyzing. And you may find that you come out thinking, wow, I never thought about that particular idea from that particular point of view. But we have to be critical in all of our texts. There's so much out there, and it was just so easy to find things that we really need to be critical about, and really need to figure out where is this being written from, and what is its purpose, and what point of view. So when you critically analyze, it helps learners to interrogate all texts for bias, prejudice, point of view. What point of view is this being written from? What is the bias that's happening here? We also want to help learners reflect on the social, political, and power relations embedded in those texts. Oftentimes it's written from the point of view of the dominant culture. So we'll look at children's literature that is written from the dominant white English culture. And there's nothing wrong with those texts, but if that's the only point of view that's ever brought forth, then those children who are marginalized will never see themselves in text, and they'll begin to say, well, why is my point of view, or why is my background never here? And so that's how we have to look at these. We have to look at texts and go, okay, where's the point of view? Where is this coming from in here? And it's imperative for students to develop critical literacy in order to gain control over text, media, and other technologies. Our grade ones, our grade fours, our grade eights, our grade 12s are being inundated with text. And so they must have this is, I think, the most important one, this critical literacy component, because they have to be able to wade through all of this text and find the point of view, the bias, the agenda. Why is it being written? And who is in power? Who's in power? Who has the power that this whole book is resting on? Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do now is, how are issues of power, equity, and social justice discussed in Wings? So the book that you listened to at the beginning of the lecture. I want you to think about what cultural views are challenged through this literature, and how can thinking critically about this literature enhance understanding and knowledge. So we're going to have a bit of a go with that on Thursday. So have some time to think about that. I also want you to think, I have 4 books that I have. One is a PDF and 3 you can listen to. So I want you, again, what are the same question, what are the issues of power, equity, and social justice discussed in No Come As My Teacher, Red Park and Mary, Different Pond, and 1010 in the Congo? And again, the same question here. So you're going to discuss on Thursday each book. I want you to critically analyze the concept of power, equity, and social justice around these specific views. So I want you to look at 1010 the Congo and discuss the view of the specific African people portrayed in the book. This one, know that 1010 the Congo, this is written in 1946, but just look at the illustrations and I think I have it on, do I have one more? Yes, I have one more. Look at the illustrations particularly. Look at No Come As My Teacher from a Native American life. How is the Native American life portrayed? Red Park and Mary discuss view of women and women as mentors, and Different Pond discuss the concept of parenting. So here are the links. Enjoy this. These are, again, amazing texts. And just remember 1010 in the Congo, 1946. You can look specifically at pages 19 to 28 and look at the illustrations and be ready to have a critical look at all of these texts. Enjoy.